Here's a warning. If you're a leader who believes that kids matter, at some point you will try to change some things. Why? Because I'm absolutely sure the last video convinced you that what's happening in a kid's world now will shape their world as an adult later. But before you build a treehouse inside your sanctuary, or move your flat screen TV to the church, or install a rock wall for middle schoolers, take a minute to ask yourself a few questions. What do you want kids to grow up and believe? What exactly is your responsibility as a volunteer? What are you hoping to convince parents to do? And what will be the best way for you to measure success? Here's the point. If kids matter, then something else matters too. A strategy matters. So, what is your strategy? We define strategy as a plan of action with an end in mind. So when I ask what is your strategy, I'm really asking you to clarify two things. What do you want to accomplish in a kid's life? And what are the action steps that will help you make that happen? Here's another way to think about it. Your strategy has the potential to connect your leaders, resources, events, and curriculum into one integrated plan to lead a child or teenager into a growing relationship with Jesus. A strategy links whatever you have to wherever you're going. And without a strategy, all of your assets lose their potential to have collective influence. They're kind of like individual football players who all play independently. Can you imagine saying to a college football coach, "Don't worry about a strategy, just send your best 11 players out on the field, give them the ball, and tell them to score"? It would be a sad game. Even if every player trained on the best exercise equipment, played in a state-of-the-art stadium, and dressed in the most expensive gear, the team wouldn't move the ball very far. The odds would be stacked against them if they didn't have a strategy. The point is, your strategy matters. I know you know that. But if I could push just a little harder, I would suggest something that you might want to debate. Because I think strategy matters more than most of us think. So what if I went as far to say your strategy matters more than your mission? Think about it. Every church is really connected to the same mission, right? It's really part of what Jesus said 2,000 years ago when he said, "Go make disciples. Lead people who are not following me to follow me." But if every church basically has the same mission, why do some churches grow and others don't? Why are there a lot of churches and organizations with great missions that have ceased to exist? The reason they failed in their mission was not because they didn't believe what was true, or have good ideas, or recruit incredible people. It was because they couldn't develop and execute an effective strategy. And if I could say it another way, it's your strategy, not your mission, that determines your success. I mean, it's easy to skip over the issue of strategy. We meet churches all the time that have good motives and great leaders, but just can't seem to get momentum. Why? Because good intentions without an intentional strategy won't lead anyone very far. So when it comes to making kids matter, what if you start acting like you are not leading kids anywhere unless you actually have a plan? It's kind of like this. You remember the orange traffic cones that we use to direct cars at a big concert or an event? Imagine what would happen if someone just scattered the cones randomly across the parking lot. More than likely, it would create a traffic jam and cars would not be able to move anywhere. But when the cones are arranged strategically, they have the potential to move hundreds of vehicles exactly where they need to go. Now, imagine that your church's weekly programs, annual events, kids groups, and age-specific curriculums are like traffic cones. How you arrange them to work together is important. They are either strategic or they're random. By the way, if you and I were sitting at a table talking about your ministry to kids and teenagers, I would probably ask you this question. Is what you do with children and teenagers characterized by strategic steps that lead kids somewhere, or by random activities? When I first started leading in ministry, I would jump from activity to activity, idea to idea, program to program, but there wasn't really a master plan. And not only that, what I did for students was never really connected to what the children's pastor did for kids. Everyone operated in their own space, like an isolated cone in a parking lot. Everyone had good intentions. It just never occurred to us that we could be more effective if we worked on a common strategy together. Being strategic implies that all of your activities and resources are aligned around a clear plan so they work together to lead a kid in a direction. If you don't have a plan, then maybe you aren't really leading kids anywhere. One of the things that became evident in our latest research is the importance of a strategic leader being present at every phase of a kid's life. Because every phase of a kid's life has unique challenges they have to navigate. So guess what? Kids need a new kind of leader who will show up to keep them from getting stuck. Kids face critical transitions as they move from phase to phase. That's why they need a new kind of leader who will stand in the gap and help them keep moving in the right direction. You are that leader. Since strategy involves having a plan of action with an end in mind, it's important for you to answer at least 2 questions about the kids you lead. Number 1, what do you want kids to become? When kids grow up and leave your church, what do you want their faith and character to look like? You can ask the same question a few different ways. During their freshman or sophomore year of college, when they're sitting in their dorm rooms, what do you want them to remember about what you've said? When they get their first job or rent an apartment, how do you want them to relate to God, the world, and themselves as a result of being in your church? When every leader or parent can agree on a clear and concise answer to those questions, it will give you a common language. And speaking the same language has a way of keeping everyone focused on what matters most. And speaking the same language makes it easier for everyone to lead kids in the same direction. We believe Jesus actually gave us the answer to the question, what do you want a kid to become? It happened when a religious leader asked him, "Teacher, which is the greatest commandment in the law?" Jesus' response was timeless. Love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your mind. This is the first and greatest commandment. And the second is like it. Love your neighbor as yourself. And then he said this, all the law and the prophets hang on these 2 commandments. There's a lot packed into his response. Jesus hung everything that matters on one big idea, love. He seemed to clarify that the main priority is a relationship that starts with God. So what if everything you do simply leads kids to love God, love others, and love life? That means whatever you do or say should help move kids to become people who love God in a way that affects the rest of their world. The second strategic question is this: where do you want kids to be? The first question, what do you want kids to become, implies you're leading them in a direction. But the second question, where do you want kids to be, suggests you're leading them to a destination. Both questions actually point to relationships. Again, maybe it will help give clarity if I ask the second question a few different ways. See if this makes sense. What is the optimal environment in your church where kids can grow in their relationship with Jesus? Here's another way to ask it. If every week in your church, children or teenagers could only go to one place, experience one environment, or participate in one activity, what would you tell them to do? The point is, once you decide the answer, everything else you do should work as a strategic step to that environment. The way you answer this question matters because your church has limited resources, limited volunteers, and limited time. So it's important for you to know how to prioritize which environment in your church is most important. Again, it's difficult to lead kids somewhere if you don't know where you're leading them. So what is your answer to the question, where do you want kids to be? Is it Sunday school? Is it a student gathering? Wherever it is, you need to know the answer. Because until you do, you can't be strategic in how you lead kids. We think the best answer to the question is whichever environment connects to a small group of kids with a consistent leader. We call that a small group. You can pick a different answer, but just remember that everything else you do will be affected by how you respond to these 2 questions. Having a plan with a clear end in mind means your weekly curriculum, seasonal events, and your primary influencers should all work together to lead kids at every phase to love Jesus, to love others, and to love life. Every resource and leader should be designed so they will work as steps to build a sense of community in a small group context. The point is, strategy matters more than you think. We can all learn that lesson from Nehemiah. The walls of Jerusalem had been broken down for 150 years. But before Nehemiah rallied other leaders and acquired resources, he rode around the walls to devise a plan. That's because success is determined by strategy, not just the mission. Nehemiah knew that all of the talent needed to build the walls was already there. They just needed a clear plan. What they needed was to play as a team. Strategy gives you a team advantage. When you combine what you do with what others do, you have collective influence in a kid's life. But you need to do your part. That's why one of the most strategic things you can do is to become intentional about staying aligned as a team. Just for the record, you will never have to work at getting misaligned as a team. That's because the gravitational pull in any organization or team is to drift apart. So you have to be intentional about staying on the same page. And the best way to stay on the same page is to get in the same room, to simply meet together in the right way. Hopefully, that's what this video will help you do. I mean, maybe you're even watching this as a team. At least you can agree about the need to agree. You can start meeting about meeting. You can develop a strategy to have a strategy, if you know what I mean. The difference in what happens when you are in sync is amazing. Everything will have a different kind of momentum. What if all of your programs worked as steps together? What if all of your curriculums reinforced the same essential truths and principles? And what if all of your parents understood your strategy so clearly they could be on the same page too? And what if every staff member and volunteer worked in sync? You see, strategy is the difference in a team running the ball down a field and scoring and a group of disorganized players running in circles. It's the difference in moving traffic through a city and being stuck in a traffic jam. Strategy is just more important than you think. And there's too much at stake to keep doing what you do randomly without a clear plan.